episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, once again to another episode of our show, bringing you another truly fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us. Today we have the honor of being joined by Eric Meyer, who is the founder and director of an organization called Generation Atomic, which is a nuclear advocacy nonprofit he founded after hearing about the promises of novel advanced nuclear reactors that were coming down the pike, and he ultimately decided to devote his life to saving and expanding the use of atomic energy. Eric worked as an organizer on several political, union, and issue campaigns while in graduate school for applied public policy. And he took time off to attend the climate talks in Paris, as well as sing opera about atomic energy. He began his full-time nuclear work back in 2016 with environmental progress by organizing marches, rallies, different trainings in California, New York, Illinois, ultimately before leaving to found Generation Atomic in late 2016. And in only a really short period of time, Generation Atomic has really grown substantially in the world of nuclear advocacy. Over the last year, they've held several advocacy trainings, conferences, March for Science, talked to thousands of voters, and ultimately carried the banner for nuclear energy climate talks in Morocco and Germany and Poland. Eric has his bachelor's in music performance, his master's in advocacy and political leadership with concentrations in the public sector and nonprofits, both from University of Minnesota-Duluth. A lot of interesting things to talk about today. Eric Meyer, thanks so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, me too. And I'd love to start things off just by handing you the floor for a little bit to talk a little bit more about your background, your early journey, and a little bit of how you got from music to this intense interest in all things nuclear.
Yeah, I think it started in kind of a little bit of an unremarkable way. I mean, we watch, I'm sure you've seen lots of TED Talks, you've watched lots of videos on the internet, but there was one video that kind of flipped the switch for me, and that was about thorium molten salt reactors, very specific type of nuclear reactor that uses a different type of fuel, thorium, then in a different type of medium for that fuel. Instead of a solid fuel, it's a liquid fuel. And the video talked about all the promises of this type of technology, and how we almost pursued it more fully back in the 1960s. At the time I was just thinking, wow, well, we have these two problems, right? We have climate change and we have nuclear waste, which, to be honest, I had maybe an inflated idea about how dangerous and how much of an issue that actually was, but we can talk about that later.
Sure.
But I was thinking, here's a really elegant way to solve both of these problems at the same time. We can provide abundant carbon-free electricity for the world while getting rid of our existing stockpiles of nuclear waste. So that kind of put me on the path to thinking about that a little bit more. Within a year, I had composed music for a YouTube documentary on the subject, with a Canadian friend of mine who's still making videos to this day. And I think he's maybe like one of the biggest unsung heroes of the pro-nuclear movement. His name's Gordon McDowell.
Mm-hmm.
Just, stay-at-home dad / videographer. And then I think, I was still sort of thinking, man, I'm probably going to be a music teacher, maybe a performer. I was having a lot of success singing. But then in 2012, there was a 500-year flood that hit the city that I was going to college in, Duluth, Minnesota. Ended up losing my car in that. I mean, it's swept away in a crazy torrential downpour. 10 inches of rain fell in less than 24 hours. And I think that was a little bit of a challenge from the universe, that maybe there are enough opera singers in the world, but not enough people advocating for this really important technology in solving climate change. And, that's nuclear power. So as I started to dig into the topic a bit more, I realized that just all nuclear energy is good, not just specifically this reactor type. I had an image in my head that conventional nuclear energy was very much like The Simpsons, where it's you're only the only thing standing between you and a large large disaster is an incompetent power plant employee, and that nuclear waste was a liquid that was constantly leaking out of these rusty oil drums, basically. And when I learned the reality that there's a culture around safety and excellence, and that spent nuclear fuel is stored in these incredibly robust casks that are tested by dropping them on spikes and crashing trains into them. That opened my mind even further to realizing that I don't know all there is to know about this. So yeah, I think it really, that being challenged by that storm, then, working my way through grad school, thinking constantly about how to message this better, how to build an organization around this idea, led me to where I am today. And, where I'm looking at the calendar every day thinking, okay, we got four more weeks till the climate talks. Can we get this, that, and the other thing done? Yeah, it's been exciting and really fulfilling work.
It's interesting when you mention things like the molten salt reactors, and we see a lot of press about sort of who's in the investor community that's it's getting involved in the area. It's kind of hot, and you were just mentioning these technologies, like a lot of technologies, have been around for a long time, but for some reason, one decision or another, they didn't become the primary tool. I can go back to Tesla and Edison and so forth. Talk about molten salt for a little bit, and I think I've been hearing it a lot from people inside my family here that are really interested in the topic. Some basic sort of stuff that I was reading about. They don't operate at these really high pressures, so there's no explosion risk. A lot of the gases that are normally given off, they get absorbed into this molten salt, and then they produce a much higher electricity generation because you can operate them at higher temperatures and so forth. Walk us just through a little bit about everything else that's cool about molten salt reactors that the public should know about in 2021.
Well, yeah, you covered a lot of the main points right there. Yeah, operating at higher temperatures opens up the opportunity to do some really interesting chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
The number one positive about molten salt reactors, in my opinion, is that it opens up the door to something called high temperature steam electrolysis.
Okay.
So sure, your listeners are familiar with electrolysis, where you start with water, you're splitting it into hydrogen and oxygen. And while we talk a little bit about hydrogen fuel cells as a potential fuel for the future, I'm a believer in actually taking that hydrogen and using it as a feedstock to make hydrocarbons. So stringing some carbon molecules on there, so we can actually make things like jet fuel and gasoline and everything that we use in our current combustion-based infrastructure. That you ask your run-of-the-mill environmentalist, they'll probably say, oh, well, we need to switch everything over to batteries. So in my opinion, that's, well, one, it's going to be really difficult to do that for things that are that's really important to have low weight and high energy density, like a battery powered airplane. Oh man, you're going to be going a lot slower and carrying a lot less for a lot shorter distance, and that's not going to be very viable without a huge change in behavior. And really, the change in behavior part is kind of the central thread through all of this, and why you would go for advanced nuclear versus some other type of clean energy technology. Advanced nuclear is the impossible burger of clean energy technologies. It's the one option we have where we don't need to expect everyone to make radical lifestyle changes in order to confront climate change. And in fact, we can continue to bring up the poorest people in the world, the unplugged, the low watt world, as it were, rather than kind of asking them to stay in relative poverty and struggling and with, subsistence farming and things, which is, you dig into the climate plans of Greenpeace and Sierra Club, and you see a lot of assumptions about the poorest people in the world staying extremely poor, which I think is morally very problematic. But with molten salt reactors, you can still have the I'm from rural Minnesota originally, and there's a lot of people who drive big pickup trucks that I can't imagine would be comfortable switching to something a little smaller, even a battery powered truck, if when you're out in rural areas and you got to drive quite a bit. But this kind of thing, making carbon neutral synthetic fuels out of the air and the water, that allows people to continue to do what they do without having the negative impact on the planet. So I think that's the most inspiring part about molten salt reactors, and there are a few other reactors that can go to high temperatures as well, like high temperature gas reactors, for example, that are cooled with helium. But yeah, it's amazing. Of course, all this stuff is still about 10 years down the road, hopefully maybe a little longer than that till commercialization. So between now and then, we got to get going on decarbonizing the electricity sector. Plenty of way to go there.
Absolutely. Talk a little bit about the organization. I mean, you set it up in 2016. I went to the website. You have a lot of folks working in different capacities. Talk about who's involved, how you're funded currently, and we'll get into some of the policy and advocacy issues in a little bit. But just give us a broad introduction to Generation Atomic and its structure.
Sure. Yeah. So we're a nonprofit, so you have to have a board of directors in order to be a nonprofit organization.
Sure.
So on our board, we have people who are retired from electric utilities, like Gene, he's our treasurer now, but he was our board president formerly. He comes from Dominion on their nuclear side, so he's worked up in the C-suite, almost, or I guess he's a vice president technically, and also former president of the American Nuclear Society. So we got people, all the way up who've been at the top, and then we have people like Heather Hoff from the Mothers for Nuclear, who just works at a nuclear power plant. She's was a reactor operator for years, and then a procedure writer, helping train people in on how to operate Diablo Canyon, the last nuclear plant in California, that makes about a fifth of all the clean electricity in a very large state, I must say.
Sure.
So we'd like to get people from a variety of backgrounds. We have people from the advanced nuclear side of things, like Cannon Bryan and Nick Turin, who work at Terrestrial Energy and TerraPower, respectively, working on some amazing advanced nuclear designs. And then on our advisory board, we like to, have an even broader range of experience. People who are students currently, immigrants. There's an accountant on there. People work in the national labs. But one, I guess, common line through all of it is these people are just passionate about the environment. They think that they have the opportunity and the responsibility as the arbiters of this technology to bring it to the world, and being on the board of Generation Atomic is one of the ways that they can do that. And then our volunteers on top of that, we have all these different volunteer teams, government, communications, outreach, technical research, education, the variety of people who are involved in that is just incredible. I have journalists, people who are still pursuing their degree. We have a PhD candidate in energy systems analysis, and And then on top of that, a bunch of interns and fellows who do work with us. And yeah, it's just I got to say, really I'm really lucky, fortunate to be able to work with so many incredible people that take it as, you know, part of their personal mandate to do what they can for a better future. And you know, also your son is one of these people.
That he is. That he is.
So cool, starting up the nuclear club at his high school. It's been awesome working with him as well.
Yeah, he really enjoys the organization, and I'm surprised that he's passionate about a lot of things, but I'm really this one is like, yeah, he's going to be alongside there as these molten salt reactors come along in the next decade. It's going to be interesting to see what he does. So you have a lot of policy and advocacy issues that you're focusing on now in lieu of what's coming down the pike. Things like the Nuclear Production Tax Credits, the Carbon Dividend Trust Fund Act, and the American Nuclear Infrastructure Act. Walk us through, I see there's a lot more going on, but walk us through some of these and just talk a little bit about sort of the landscape via these programs and so forth that you're shaping in lieu of what's going to be coming down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate that the message is getting out there that nuclear energy needs to be a part of our clean energy plan moving forward. And you know, thankfully we have members of both parties in both branches of Congress that see that as well. So just I had a couple notes about the current legislative situation. I was just trying to pull up here.
Sure.
So I could speak in a little more detail.
Take your time.
I was asked to do like a kind of rundown on the infrastructure and reconciliation bills. There it is. A couple of weeks ago, as part of, I also like to volunteer with other organizations. One of the ones is a Climate Reality Project, which is kind of Al Gore's environmental organization. I've been a mentor there and done their training and things, and they do a lot of good work. But I detect this kind of maybe tribal kind of uncertainty where people don't want to expose themselves as being supportive of nuclear energy. So as a result, everybody just assumes everybody else doesn't like it, and discussions don't happen. So I've found that because I'm there and am not afraid to bring the subject up, it's really helped a lot of people be a little more confident in supporting an all of the above clean energy solution. Anyway, I found my rundown here. So so obviously we have two bills. It's the 4D chess that's happening right now between the infrastructure bill, the reconciliation bill, and the debt ceiling. Is hard to wrap your mind around. And even I heard Joe Biden the other day saying, I have no idea when this is going to pass. He said, he's like, it could be 6 minutes, 6 days, or 6 weeks.
Right. I heard that.
It's not going to be 6 minutes, but yeah, there's a lot of support for all types of clean energy, electric vehicles, grid upgrades for renewables, that kind of thing. But fortunately, also in the infrastructure bill, there's $6 billion for advanced reactor demonstration projects, which is great. That's going. The two designs that have been selected for that are Natrium, which is Bill Gates's TerraPower, up with General Electric Hitachi, and it's a very, very cool liquid sodium fast reactor with a molten salt heat storage, so it can ramp up and down really quickly for the grid needs, while running the nuclear reactor just straight out, that part doesn't have to ramp. It's just how much energy they're putting onto the electric grid, which gets to ramp. So, that's been one of the economic challenges of nuclear, is that the way we've designed our electricity market, it's like more profitable to produce energy at certain times versus other times. Sometimes it might even cost you money if the grid is just full of electricity. And with a nuclear plant, it's designed to run just flat out full bore for 18 months in a row. So having to go up and down, that's not its forte. So they're hoping to address that with that reactor. And the other reactor design that the $6 billion is going to is X Energy's high temperature gas reactor, which will help prove out some of the things I was talking about earlier with high temperature steam electrolysis and stuff like that. So that's super exciting in the infrastructure bill. Also, very, very potentially helpful is the reconciliation bill, which has production tax credits for many different types of clean energy, including nuclear. I should note that as it's currently written, wind and solar get about $25 per megawatt hour, and nuclear gets $3, which doesn't seem super fair. But I'm glad it's in there, and I'm told that this will potentially change the calculus on some of the existing nuclear plants that look like they could close early for economic reasons. So Palisades is one of these in Michigan. Another one is Diablo Canyon, which is being closed for political purposes, but because of the CEPP, which is the Clean Energy Performance Plan, or it used to be called Payment Program. I think it's Performance Plan now. That will cost, closing Diablo Canyon early could cost PG&E in California somewhere between $500 million and $1.5 billion to do so, because of all the extra money they'd have to, they would be missing out on from this clean electricity payment program. So those a couple things could be really huge for nuclear coming up. I'm hoping they all pass with flying colors. Also, I'm excited about the other stuff in the bill that has to do with healthcare workers and universal pre-K and all the good social stuff too. I'm a fan of, but as far as nuclear goes, it looks good too.
Cool, very cool. Are there? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of countries around the world using nuclear power and different shares of total electricity usage coming from nuclear. How much you're learning from some of these other countries? And I know France is up there. I forget sort of where we are. I think we're something like 20% or whatever. They're upwards of around 70%. Any interesting learnings from some of the international front as you sort of build the programs and initiatives at Generation Atomic?
Yeah, I think France and Sweden and the province of Ontario have really provided a blueprint to the world on how you can decarbonize a large industrial economy without sacrificing reliability to the grid and without sacrificing affordable electricity. And Germany has done a Dunning-Kruger style effort to decarbonize without nuclear, and shown us the pitfalls of trying to do so. Especially now in the last couple of weeks, we see the gas shortage in Europe drive prices up to highest they've been in 20, 30 years, and close to 10 times what they were just a few months ago. Incredible how not having or incredible how relying on one source of energy for both your heat and your electricity is really maybe a bad idea with gas. But yeah, France, I mean, they decarbonized their entire electricity sector, virtually their entire electricity sector. I work with a lot of engineers, so I always am aware of not using absolutes when maybe they're almost correct, but virtually their entire electricity sector in about 15 years. That's incredible, and that's the kind of timeline we need to be on right now to prevent the worst impacts of climate change and ocean acidification. So they made the blueprint. It's pick a design that works well. Build it over and over again, and you'll get good at it. You'll strengthen and grow the supply chains, and give that kind of predictability to investors, so that you're not spending 2/3 of the cost to build your reactor on financing, as the reactor project. Power plant project in the UK, Hinkley Point C, is doing. I mean, I think bankers are making enough money. We don't need to pay them more to finance nuclear projects. But I get it. It's historically there's been some risk there. You can't blame them when you see things like Shoreham nuclear plant on Long Island, where they built an entire reactor and had it ready to go. It had to even done the hot testing, and it just needed to be connected to the grid. And Andrew Cuomo's dad, Mario, said, "Yeah, I don't like nuclear. Turn it off and build a fossil plant there instead, and hook it up to those same power lines." And we don't have a good. Our brains aren't really configured to perceive risk accurately. So what we did, we shut down a clean power plant because of a hypothetical risk, and instead went for the guaranteed risk of air pollution.
Right.
Thousands of more kids got asthma. Several hundred more people certainly died from pollution-related illnesses. And it's just because we're not wired to think like that yet. So hopefully, through the work of Generation Atomic and other nuclear advocacy organizations, we can give people the mental tools they need to properly assess these risks and benefits.
Right. Speaking about those mental tools, obviously you mentioned some, of sort of the political / financial pushback, but I can imagine, right? So the HBO Chernobyl special, whenever it came out last year, it was a great show. I mean, I enjoyed watching it myself, but once again, here you're dealing with an event that happened over 30 years ago in the public's mind. And you guys have to deal with that. Hey, this is not what we're talking about. RBMK reactor, blah, blah, blah. I get it. The pushback and just sort of we see, it takes education, right? Whether it's COVID vaccine, whether it's this or other things, issues in just the general public and in the education process of getting over some of these mental humps from the past.
Yeah, fear is an emotion that cuts deep, and facts in most situations are not going to be enough. Not by themselves. They at least need to be packaged, wrapped up in some type of emotional appeal, some type of values alignment. And that's a big part of what we do is run trainings on how to empathize with people, how to listen, how to find the core concern that somebody has, whether it's public safety, or maybe on the economics, or something related to the political structure or capitalism or something like that. It's incredible how like a core value that someone has can kind of filter down and percolate and kind of frame up and be a lens on which they see nuclear energy. We've all heard about what about the waste, and what about the risk of accidents, but you'll hear some new ones at the climate talks, like but what about how nuclear energy reinforces centralized governing structures and prevents people from truly being free of capitalist oppression or something like that. You you got to get creative as an advocate maybe to respond to that. And
Sure.
For that, I might say, oh, well, have you ever heard of Oklo, the microreactor company that was named after the natural nuclear reactor on Earth about 2 billion years ago? Well, that's a decentralized energy system right there, and looking to replace all those communities that are dependent on diesel fuel being flown or trucked in to remote areas in Alaska and Canada. Yeah, it's tough. I'm looking forward to having more conversations, trying more communication strategies, persuasion strategies next month at the climate talks, and doing trainings with the gaggle of nuclear engineers from all across the world, but Europe especially. That'll be joining us there. It's always a lot of fun, and I think this year I was counting the list of delegates that Team Nuclear is sending from the various nuclear societies and everything, and I think we're up to over 40 now. People will be there both weeks in the blue zone, engaging with people. So it'll be the largest presence of pro-nuclear people, dedicated pro-nuclear people there that we've ever had. When I went in COP 22, I guess that would have been 2016 in Marrakesh, it was like myself and 5 other people and the Russian government. That was it. So really going hard this year. I think it's gonna pay some dividends, and I think we're right on the precipice of a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, I always thought nuclear was a good idea," and kind of shifting from oh, it's too expensive, it's too slow, it's too dangerous, to oh, I always thought it was a good idea. Of course, we're right up to that tipping point. I feel, and maybe this year we'll get pushed over the side of it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, Eric, at the beginning, we had a little chat about molten salt, but you mentioned, there could be other exciting stuff. What other tools, technologies do you see coming down the pike, maybe after molten salt, maybe before, who knows, either on the generation side or the waste reduction side that gets you excited about what's going to be happening in the coming decades?
I think that maybe the only way we're actually going to be able to limit warming to 1.5 or below, and actually going to be able to limit and stop the impacts of ocean acidification, which threatens everything in the ocean with a spine, is going to be by using shipbuilding techniques. I think that's, even as if we get really good at construction as we do it now, that's one thing, and that'll get us a ways down the road. But just doing the sheer numbers of decarbonizing not only electricity but all primary energy, so everything we need for heat, for industrial uses, concrete, agriculture, it's a really big number.
Okay.
And I think building nuclear reactors in shipyards, sending them to where they're needed, that's the kind of output that we'll need to confront this. And there have been more and more companies talking about this. Also, studies done about this. I think the first company to really articulate this idea was Thorcon. And we just read Jack Devaney's book, Why Nuclear Power Was a Flop. He's one of the founders of Thorcon, and we just read that in our book club. So big fan of that. And then since then we see Seaborg Technologies out of Denmark is working on a design like this, like power ships that can be places, and it can be sent places that were just hit with hurricanes, or I'm thinking about Beirut in Lebanon, where you get a giant explosion, and the country's already suffering from energy poverty, thanks thanks in part to the U.S. For bombing a lot of that infrastructure 4 or 5 decades ago. But it could just help eliminate so much human suffering in the near term, and then actually get us to the point where we are replacing all of our fossil based infrastructure with clean power. So that would be my number one, I think, is shipbuilding techniques. And more and more of the companies who were thinking, okay, we're going to build these things on land and conventional methods are looking into that type of construction practice. So that's probably my number one. Waste reduction. Man, I know, I remember being really excited about the prospect of eliminating nuclear waste. And then, I found out that all of the existing spent fuel we have in the US would fit on a single football field, about 25 feet deep, or would fit, in a single Walmart, for example. And just volumetrically, not a lot of it. And I do think probably what's going to end up being the solution for waste is something like what Deep Isolation, the company out of California, is proposing, where they're doing it right on site of the nuclear plant. And they use techniques developed by the oil and gas industry to dig a borehole down pretty far and turn it and have it be underneath the water table, underneath any type of place that you would want contaminated with nuclear waste, so that the only way you could really get there is if gravity starts going up for some reason. And then they don't have to transport the fuel anywhere. It can happen right on site, and they can put these things in deep boreholes, and they'll be good for many millennia. I think that's probably going to be the most cost-effective way to make people comfortable with these waste products. I think the hardest part about the waste question, honestly, is detaching the waste products from the nuclear weapons industry and early uranium mining. That was done without good health standards and practices that did have an environmental justice impact on different communities. I was just at a Nuclear Regulatory Commission meeting about environmental justice, and every example the panelists gave about how uranium mining was bad for people of color was from like 30 to 70 years ago, and pretty far detached from how uranium is mined today, where it's mined today. So it's tough, those are valid feelings and concerns, and we certainly don't want people to be suffering from that upstream or downstream processes of nuclear. But we got to be real about what the realities of it are today.
Sure, absolutely. All right, it's a fascinating set of initiatives. It's going to be an exciting next few years for you and everyone at the organization. And really, obviously, you have fans in this family here, but really rooting you on moving forward. For everybody that is going to be listening to this particular episode on our podcast networks or watching on the YouTube, you've been listening to Eric Meyer, founder and director of Generation Atomic. Eric, it's a fascinating story. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a little while about what you're doing. Thanks for everything you're doing. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow through your initiatives. Really, really fascinating story.
I appreciate it, and thank you for what you're doing and bringing a wide array of really important topics and important viewpoints together. And glad to be a part of it.